With the upcoming release of the longly anticipated Kirby and the Forgotten Land for the Nintendo Switch, I really want to focus a few of my upcoming videos on the pink squishy blob ball, going through some aspects of that franchise that I find fascinating. The very first I want to look at that no one's yet made a video about involves ranking each and every game in the series from worst to best, which isn't as easy as a task as it seems. Oh yeah, before I get started, my name is Copycat, and if you haven't yet, then please subscribe to my channel and hit that bell button to stay notified when I upload new videos. Starting off on the worst game side of things is a title I guarantee many of you have never heard about called Kirby Slide, that came out exclusively for the Game Boy Advance e-reader in 2003. For those of you who may be too young to know, the e-reader was an add-on device that you could insert into your Game Boy Advance, and it could scan specific cards that you collected that would unlock secret items, levels, or even mini-games for you to play. Now, this is one of those mini-games and isn't a full experience, and was really meant more as promotional material for the Kirby Right Back At Ya TV show, where you could pick the card up at Toys R Us, or at that time, in a Nintendo Power. One entry in the series that even I had never heard about before is called Kirby's Toy Box, that came out on the Super Famicom Satellaview Internet add-on in 1996. Being released only in Japan as a peripheral never made it to North America, this game is really just a collection of arcadey minigames, including baseball, pinball, Starbreak, round and round ball, whatever that is, cannonball, arrange ball, pachinko, and ball rally, a lot of balls. Every one of these games is extremely simplistic, and really doesn't offer any replayability factor. Paired with it being on a system that almost no one played, puts it in the worst side of this franchise. Next up on the list is a free-to-play game called Team Kirby Clash Deluxe for the 3DS, which is an upgraded version of a Planet Robobot sub-game, but with improved modes and bosses. The gameplay involves you teaming up with 3 other characters to fight a wide variety of different enemies. Of course, because the game's free, there are microtransactions where you can pay real money to get the in-game currency of gem apples, which you then can use to unlock different bosses and items in the game. Whichever way you play, you're most likely to end up with the same result, being bored, as it just doesn't offer anything to keep you addicted. There's also a Super Kirby Clash Deluxe, which honestly is just the same gameplay but now on the Nintendo Switch. One Kirby entry that's essentially a clone of the classic Atari Breakout game is Kirby's Block Ball, that came out for the Game Boy in 1995. This title really doesn't have much going for it, as the gameplay is mind-numbingly simple, where you just need to clear the bricks off each stage and ensure your Kirby doesn't fall into the pit below. I can't put this game any higher than this position in this video, because at the end of the day it's literally just a straight up copy, and honestly Brick Breaker on the BlackBerry is just way better. One game that came out incredibly late in the 3DS's lifespan, which when coupled with its strange gameplay led to its failure, is Kirby's Battle Royale. Don't be fooled by this title. It is not a last man standing survival type of entry, and instead is a collection of minigames all revolved around combat and copy abilities. These unfortunately were very short experiences that run out of fun very quickly, destining this game to fade into obscurity. Up next is a pretty basic puzzle game called Kirby Star Stacker that came out for the Game Boy in 1997. Now, there's really nothing wrong with this game at all, it's just that it's definitely rudimentary in today's standards, and seems way too similar to games like Dr. Mario and Puyo Puyo, which are really just better. Honestly, in a world where it's 1997, this was probably tons of fun, but in today's standards, it's considered bad. Another puzzle game that's slightly better, but still considered bad, is Kirbys Avalanche, that came out for the SNES in 1995. I guess the fact that it does add multiplayer gameplay is a gigantic plus, as you can now face off against your friends and family. Unfortunately, it's just not that replayable of an experience to hook you in and make you keep playing. Also, once again, it's too similar to Dr. Mario. I really don't know why Nintendo was allowing such similar games. The next game we're gonna look at was the first spin-off entry in the whole series called Kirby's Pinball Land for the original Game Boy. Even though this game is probably boring to most of you young kids, you need to understand that portable gameplay was a revolutionary feat in 1992. So looking back after seeing what we have nowadays, leaves me amazed to how far we've actually come. I really can't believe Nintendo made a sequel to Kirby Star Stacker. In this version, called Kirby Superstar Stacker, that came out exclusively for the Super Famicom in 1998. Once again, the fact that you can play with a friend, I guess is a huge plus, but I'm not sure how long people were playing this game for, as it is just a simple puzzle game at the end of the day. One of the only Kirby games in this video not actually to feature the pink blob's name is DDD's Drum Dash Deluxe, that was released on the 3DS eShop in 2014. Based on Triple Deluxe's sub-game with the same name, this one has King DDD as the main character, in a sort of rhythm platformer where keeping with the beat will reward you with better prizes. For a title that's only $7.75 in US dollars, and can just be downloaded straight from the eShop, this is definitely worth checking out. Another game that's also worth the $7.75 it costs to buy is Kirby's Fighter Deluxe, that you can only get once again through the 3DS eShop. This game is essentially a Super Smash Bros. Type fighting game that uses only copy abilities instead of characters. This actually makes a ton of sense for this game to come out, as it's created by the same development team headed by Masahiro Sakurai, who, if you didn't know, is also the head developer on Super Smash Bros. Even though there is fun to be had in this game, I just don't know why you would buy this over Super Smash Bros. For the 3DS, as it just doesn't match that level of gameplay in any way, shape, or form. One title that sort of gained a cult following over the years is the racing-oriented Kirbys Air Ride that came out on the GameCube in 2003. At the time of its release, this game was absolutely obliterated by critics, with many saying that it was too boring and not serious enough to be considered a great racing title. Fans, on the other hand, completely disagreed with what these critics had to say, and agree that it's actually a very addicting experience and a great alternative to Mario Kart. A very interesting title that places our character in a 3D platforming environment is Kirby's Blowout Blast for the 3DS that came out in 2017. Instead of copy abilities, you need to rely on Kirby's inhale and spit out mechanics to defeat enemies throughout the different 3D stages, which is a unique experience unlike anything I've ever seen in the series. I think the shortness and easiness of this entry is why it's very low in this video, and I think Kirby and the Forgotten Land is going to make this entry look even worse in retrospect. The worst of the main series games without a doubt is Kirby's Dreamland 3, as it's too similar in nature to its handheld counterparts, even though it came out on the SNES in 1997. I think the reason why it's so hated all has to do with the fans expecting an upgraded, much more fleshed out title, but instead, we're greeted with something that was way too easy and too similar. I guess Mario really raised the bar in terms of platforming titles at the time, and really, this one just doesn't hold up in comparison. I'd have to say that my favorite spin-off game of the series is Kirby's Dream Course for the SNES, which is literally just a game of mini-putt where the pink blob is the ball. This is an extremely satisfying experience as each level provides surprising twists and turns, and it will make you want to play over and over to perfect your skill. This is another Kirby title where fans love the gameplay more than the critics, and to this day I'll revisit the game, which is on the Switch NES library by the way, and marvel at how much fun it actually is. Up next, we're going to look at Kirby Squeak Squad for the Nintendo DS, which is essentially just an average platforming title that follows the usual capture ability mechanic. Most gripes that people have with this game all have to do with it essentially being, once again, too similar to its previous platforming entries, something that seems to be a common problem with the franchise. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with Squeak Squad, and it is an overall enjoyable experience, but just doesn't stick out enough to make it to a better spot in this video. Reaching now more into the good game side of things, I have to mention the very first title in the franchise in Kirby's Dreamland. They came out on the Game Boy in 1992. I'm really not sure what to say about this title, as it's a classic, even if it doesn't hold up in today's standards. I've replayed this game a few times over the years, and there still is some fun to be had, even if now it probably appeals to more younger audiences. One Kirby game that was slammed by critics for being too easy, while also praised for its interesting art style, is the Crystal Shards entry that came out for the N64 in 2000. I think people expected a much more fleshed out and grander experience than what they had already seen in previous platforming installments, but instead, they got a pretty run-of-the-mill entry with just a few cool changes. It's really not a bad game at all, it just doesn't hold up to other titles from that time. One entry that I didn't realize was so loved by fans is Kirby's Triple Deluxe, that was released for the 3DS in 2014. Being the 13th platforming entry in the series, HAL Laboratories finally changed up the formula a bit, utilizing the system's 3D graphics to create a very interesting world. The most complaints I've seen about this game is that Kirby is almost unstoppable, and it never really gets hard enough to be considered fun for older audiences. Probably the most divisive game in the entire franchise is the newer Kirby Star Allies Nintendo Switch entry, as it definitely is a solid platformer, and unfortunately, even though the game was enjoyable, it really just had a flat story that left a bad taste in the mouth of players. Personally, I sort of enjoyed the game, as I was craving some sort of platforming entry that wasn't Mario based at the time, but many fans to this day say it's one of the worst of the series. I really wouldn't say that myself, and those people are definitely being haters, probably because they keep expecting more, but keep getting disappointed. One game that was pretty decent, but could have been so much better if it came out on the SNES and not the Game Boy, is Kirby's Dreamland 2, that was released in 1995. This one sort of follows the copyability mechanic, but also adds a few animal friends that allow you to do various different things in order to complete each level. I do remember playing this game growing up and beating it easily even as a young kid, so I can't really put it any higher in this video, but it's still a solid entry. Up next, we're going to look at the minigame-based Kirby Superstar and Superstar Ultra that first came out on the SNES, then years later was enhanced and re-released on the DS. One interesting thing about the original title is that it was the first to introduce helpers to the series, which are just enemies that you can turn into allies, controlled by the computer, or in some cases a second player. Most of the minigames here are platforming based, introducing some unique feature to make the gameplay more interesting, and in the DS version, even utilizing the touchscreen in some amazing ways. One entry that was immediately a failure due to it coming out on the disaster that was the Wii U is Kirby's Rainbow Curse, that was released in 2015. In this game, you don't control Kirby's movements with the D-pad, and instead you use the gamepad to help him along each stage by drawing rainbow paths. You can play with 3 other people, which is a really fun touch, but they have to use the normal Wiimotes or Pro Controller, and have to heavily rely on the player with the gamepad. A game that only appears higher up in this video because it contains a very innovative mechanic is Kirby's Tilt and Tumble, which uses motion controls to maneuver him throughout the levels. This works due to accelerometers that were put into the game's cartridge, allowing you to tilt the system to affect how the blah ball moves around. Because of the limitations of the system, the gameplay isn't exactly intricate, but it's still a very different feeling playthrough than what was usually expected. One entry that was absolutely loved by critics and fans during its release was the Return to Dreamland game for the Wii, which is pretty basic in terms of mechanics, but does add super abilities that allow you to inflict a tremendous amount more damage. At the time, many people appreciated the return to the traditional platforming Kirby capture ability gameplay, while they added enough new elements to keep everything from feeling stale. Another strange Kirby game that fans seem to really enjoy is the Mass Attack entry on the DS, mainly because of its different type of gameplay and slightly harder difficulty. In this one, you control 10 Kirbys on the screen at once, using the system's touchscreen to guide them where each of them have to go. The objective is to collect fruit and medals in each level, and bring enough of them to the end, and see how high of a score that you can get. There are also different challenges throughout each of the stages that make things much more difficult, and add another layer of replayability to this amazing game. Next, we're going to look at the first game in the series to come out on the home console, in Kirby's Adventure for the NES. This was the very first to introduce the copyability mechanic, which you've seen has pretty much become a staple of almost every game. This specific entry is also heralded as one of the best 8-bit games ever to be made, as it has some of the best graphics ever seen on the NES, and is full of groundbreaking mechanics. There are a ton of abilities to find in this one, leading to a lot of replayability and great moments. Really quickly, I just want to mention its GBA remake called Nightmare in Dreamland that had upgraded graphics, sound, and a few new sub-games. Even though one thing I really hated about the Game Boy Advance was that Nintendo consistently released ports or just remakes on the system. But I do feel like this one was sort of needed, only because Kirby's Adventure was such a great game and deserved a portable release in some form or another. One game I see a lot of people say is their favorite in the series is Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, that was released on the Game Boy Advance in 2004. What's so special about this entry is that it's in the Metrovania style, meaning that you aren't constricted to playing level by level, and instead need to explore and unlock different areas to move forward. I'll definitely say that I love how different this entry felt when I first played it, and I also remember it actually being hard. Probably the best looking Kirby game in terms of art style is the epic Yarn Wii entry, implementing certain features that work perfectly in this woolly world. Instead of capture abilities, Kirby transforms into different yarn creations that all help him traverse in unique ways throughout the different stages, and at times might even require you to use motion controls along with them. This is definitely an above average entry in terms of Kirby platformers, and is fun enough to excuse a few of its easier moments. Coming in as the second best Kirby game, I mean based on my opinion and a few other lists / forum posts I've seen online, is Kirby and the Canvas Curse for the DS, which also uses the touchscreen as the main way to control the pink ball. This is done by poking Kirby to make him go faster, and by drawing rainbow paths that allow him to traverse higher up in a stage or across large gaps. Oddly, this game received mixed reviews from critics when it was released, but I've yet to see a diehard Kirby fan who dislikes this entry even in the slightest. That means that the best game in the series, at least according to this video and countless other people I've seen express this opinion online, is Kirby's Planet Robobot, that came out for the 3DS in 2016. The gameplay is in the traditional platforming style, but adds the incredibly cool Robobot armor that can be found throughout several stages. There's just a surprising amount of content for you to discover in this fresh and new feeling entry. Even if at times it can be a bit easy, it's still a blast. Alright, that's gonna be it for today's video, guys. I really hope you did enjoy this one. If you disagree with anything in this video, then please leave a comment below. And if you like it, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. I hope you guys all have a good day, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!